I'm back again.
No. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Phillips, and first order of business, of course, is to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded lands upon which we are able to gather today. The traditional owners of the Wurundjeri Woi, Warang and Bunurong nations. I work at the University of Melbourne, and the university also acknowledges the nations that other campuses are set on, and as part of that I'd like to acknowledge, through my professional identity, the Yora Yora Nation for the Dookie and Shepparton campuses, and the Dja Dja Wurrung people for the Creswick campus. So we've got 1 hour, we've got 3 amazing guests. And as you'd expect with a panel session titled Sistas Doing It, that there's going to be lots to say. So let me start with the short biographies that the Black and Bright Festival team put together, because when you internet search these guests, you see a lot of biographical material, a lot of important cultural artefacts, if you like. So I'll start with the minimum version, but my first question will be to each of the panellists as to what they would like to add to that. So, Deborah Cheetham Fralin. And also, in situ, correct my pronunciation. Oh. It's a teachable moment for all of us.
Oh, well, if you want to say it, my surname with a French accent, Frayon.
Frayon, I like it. Let me start again. So let me introduce Deborah Cheetham Frayon. AO Yora Yora and Ewan is a respected human rights advocate and recognised thought leader on the importance of cultural authority in the art music space. Throughout a long and distinguished and ongoing career, Deborah has championed the voice and visibility of classically trained Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander musicians through her achievements as a composer, performer, and those who were at Leah Purcell's keynote when she referred to the ... ellipses, because the ellipses opens up the other potentials. So please welcome Deborah Cheetham.
Thank you.
To Deborah's right, we have Deborah Dank. Deborah is a Gudanji Wakaja? Wakai. I like it.
It's not French.
Not French, yes. And Deborah and her people are from the Barkly Tablelands in the Northern Territory. For almost 40 years, Deborah has worked in various roles in primary, secondary and tertiary education, including class teacher, primary and secondary, special education teacher, senior teacher, regional consultant, regional manager, lecturer, senior lecturer, and head of school tertiary. I have ellipses. Deb has ellipses. So you will hear more from Deb through the session. And yes, welcome Deb. Dr. Helen Milroy is a descendant of the Palkayu?
Not French also.
Okay, Palkayu people of the Pilbara region of Western Australia, and was born and educated in Perth. Australia's first Indigenous doctor, Helen studied medicine at the University of Western Australia and is currently Professor of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, also at UWA, and Honorary Research Fellow at the Telethon Kids Institute. Open pause and applause. So what an amazing opportunity we have today, and I appreciate that Dr. Milroy's already been on the stage and warmed up the room for us, so thank you for that. So we've all acknowledged to the Black and Bright Festival team led by Artistic Director and CEO Jane Harrison. And I do again in reading out to you the particularity of the way they've framed this conversation. How do three fabulous black women write while juggling the many roles Aboriginal women fulfil in their communities? The session, of course, is in partnership with the Stella Prize. So, starting with Deborah. So we've heard a version of your biography so far. Is there anything you would like to add that allows the audience to better know you?
My least favourite task in the whole world is updating my bio. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. And so a couple of years ago, I was thinking, how do I distill this to something that is the essence? And most often now, my bio is Yorta Yorta by birth. The matrilineal line there from my mother, Monica Little. So Yorta Yorta by birth, stolen generation by government policy, soprano by diligence, composer by necessity, and lesbian by practice. And basically these days the rest you could look up online and you can believe some or all or none. And but really at the end of the day I sort of had to let go of all of the things that were online that just weren't accurate or were an exaggeration or basically underplayed, because those relationships and those connections are not the ones that I seek as a performing artist. You won't see copious amounts of recordings that I've made or because I look to be in the space with people. I think about what you've undergone this morning to be here live and connect, and those are the connections that I value. So I tried to bring it down to this essence of who I am from the beginning and give people something to think of. The things that I've done and the accumulation of achievements, mostly people can look into that, but the thing that you're doing now in a space where people have made the effort to be there in person, I think that's the thing I'm most interested in of all.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Deborah. Deb.
Thank you, Sandra. I just want to give my unswerving thanks to Bunjil and acknowledge that presence that allows us here as well. So there's so much wisdom in what Deborah has said, particularly around the truths and filtering what's there and what's not there. I'm told, and you have probably all been told, that I've written a book. I need to tell you that I didn't write that book. I sat with country. I have the very real privilege of having grown up on country, in remote places, with my family, until I was about 13, when my dad decided he needed to relocate us into town because I was kind of going a little bit feral. So the book kind of wrote itself. I was merely the person who jotted the words, put the words on the page. One of the things that is not anywhere around, I think, on the internet is the work that my family continue to do around attempts to protect our country. Yes. Our country is on the Beetaloo, and it is literally being fracked, I will say, because we're in such polite company. But I want to kind of take out the R and the A and put in a U, because that's what's happening. And yeah, there is just so much that's going on within that space. The fraughtness of that work has I suppose another good thing is that my eldest daughter, lives internationally, and she is gaining significantly more ground and support around that than she is here in Australia. And we know that. That's not surprising to any of us. So, you know, that's... My biggest job is granny. I'm granny. My official job is as Enterprise Fellow with the University of South Australia, and sort of sitting and recording some more of those words that the old people, that country, that the ancestors are generous enough to share with me. So,
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Deb. I really appreciate that, sharing from both Deborah and Deb. And
You can call me Deb if you like.
so, Helen, yes, your biography on the internet is pretty impressive. Is there anything or any way that you would like to add to what has been shared about you so the audience may get to know you better?
Yeah, it's an interesting question when you think about that, and I love Deborah's levels of identification, and it's interesting the way people in the modern day also identify themselves and how children identify themselves as well. It's becoming actually quite complex, and I've had kids that have identified themselves as, you know, I'm a problem, you know, and that's often how they first present themselves. And I think, wow, you know, how do we get to that point where that's the way a child might actually look at themselves? So I think what I would like to be known as going forward is, and look, my mum's still alive. She's 96, and she's the preeminent storyteller in our mob, and all credit to her. She's just amazing. But I would like to be known as a storyteller, so and a listener, because I have listened to literally many thousands of people's stories and children's stories over the course of my career, both in mental health, on the Royal Commission, and in various other aspects of my career. So I think storyteller and listener to me are the two things that I pride myself on in a way, because everything else in a way can fall underneath that. Because if you're a good listener, then you can understand people's distress. If you can tell a story in a way that helps a person understand their life, then you've achieved a great deal. So we like to have these professional labels, but they actually fall away when you really distill it down to what it means to truly listen to someone, to bear witness to their story, and then to be able to relate it back to them in a way that helps them to make sense of their life. So I think that for me would be the two. The third one would be grandmother. I became a grandmother. I mean, I used to steal my brother's kids because, you know, my daughters were just a bit slow in getting on with it. And so my brother had so many kids, I said he doesn't mind missing a few grandchildren, I'll just claim them. And they were always coming around to my house anyway. So I just pretended on them, you know, while I was waiting for my own. But when I got my first grandchild, I hadn't realised what a beautiful club the Grandmothers Club was. And I thought, well, I would love my daughter and I would love my grandson and it would be the same. It's not. It's completely different. And I love watching my daughter love her son. And then I love them both. So while my daughter's holding my son, I'm holding both of them. And it is an entirely different experience, and it is beautiful. And it really made me think how many of our kids don't have grandmothers. You know, we don't have enough grannies to go around. And I think that's really sad, because I know this little fella, I've got big things planned for him. And I'm just going to love him to pieces and spoil him rotten, and he's going to know that he can always come to me. And then my benefit is that I know he's going to look after me when I'm old, because he will love me the same way I love him, because it's always reciprocal. You know, when you love someone well, they love you back. And I just kind of think that one of the things we need to look for going forward is how we can, rather than be therapists or counsellors or supporters, how can we be grandmothers to all of these little ones coming through? That would be one of the challenges I will think about over the next little time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Please acknowledge that wisdom as well. So we do have 4 questions today, and we do have an opportunity for Q&A from the floor, which opens up about 12 o'clock. So prepare your thoughts for that as you're listening actively, as Helen encourages us. Now, my next question of each of the wonderful sisters and 2 other grandmothers at least, and Deborah on the panel, is how do you think you are going with the juggle of it all in an environment which I'd contend as Aboriginal peoples, we've been in for 250 years already, an environment with geopolitical distortions wherever we turn. People are starving, people are being starved, people are being bombed, people are being experiencing racism whenever they enter a new space. You know, people are hurting. So there's the broader geopolitical, which has been, I contend, with Aboriginal peoples for now 250 years and counting. So there's that, but there's also the juggle of family and community and responsibilities to both and to country, the careers, those professional identities, and, as Jane would like us to focus on, and the writing. Like, how do you think you're going, Deborah, with the juggle?
Well, because my wife's sitting here, I'm not going to make up something that I think sounds good, because she's going to know, because we talk about it to make sense of this world. But it's about the writing. The writing makes sense of everything else. Whether it's music or dance, whether it's painting, whether you narrate your story, whether you write it down, whatever it is, the creation of art and music, that's our way of knowing and being in the world. So I feel that it's so fortunate that is what I do as a profession, and yet I wouldn't even classify it as a profession. It's just my way of being in the world, and the busyness that's created by systems that have been imposed by colonisation. All of that busyness, yes, trying to wade through all of that. I come back to when I'm writing music, or whether it's text, lyrics for songs, whatever it is. That's how I make sense of it all. The juggling of it, I think I just try to always make my way towards experiencing the world through art and knowing and understanding the world through art. My art happens to be music, classical music, and helping others to have that pathway. But yeah, it's been really, particularly since last October, I found it really tough, I have to be honest with you. And even before that, for me, there have been, for all of us, so many personal challenges that have been inflicted on us from external forces. And I do stand with you, Aunt. I do say, yeah, to the next hill. But sometimes you just need to stay in the shade down the bottom for a bit to muster up that energy again. This is a really long-winded answer, I'm sorry. But what I've done, to be more succinct, is that all of those challenges, I have poured that into whatever I've been writing. Not merely as a cathartic experience, not really, but to actually not only just having experienced it and know it, but to understand it, and then to also hopefully help others understand. It's been tough since October 14. I was on stage that night singing a huge work that I wrote in recognition of the Gunditj Mara people and their resistance war. And I knew going on stage what the result was. I didn't know how horrendous it would be, but I knew what it was going on stage, and there was a moment of unity with the people who'd come to Hamer Hall that night. I don't know if anybody was there, but it was quite a moment when I came on stage of recognition that the fight for the fight for recognition and a voice had been lost on that occasion. But after that, I just felt really mute. But I had works to write. I had 4 commissions to work on. And so I just poured my experience of what I was feeling in that moment into that. You know, in the same way that I did through the marriage equality debate, which was won in the end by a very small margin. All of the hatred around that as well. I had to pour what I was feeling and my experience into whatever I was creating, and I found that that was really helpful to find my way through. So it is juggling, yes, in one sense, but it's not, the writing isn't what I do, it's who I am and how I know the world, so it helps me make sense of all of that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks so much, Deborah. And Deb, you can refuse the juggle metaphor as well.
I think I might, Sandra, thank you. Because, you know, going back to grandchildren, I have 2. My daughter's 2, really slow. My son's even slower. But my eldest granddaughter, who turns 14 this year, she has always referred to me as Grandma. Her dad is from Kolkata, so she's got this really interesting little accent. So Grandma can't happen, but Grandma can. So, and I quite like that because it kind of alludes to the thing that drives me now. And it, you know, like world peace, it's kind of trying to make the world more comfortable for my children. And I see my children as all my mob from home, and all the black kids and all the white kids as well, because they are the people who are going to be taking care of all of us, I hope. So my thing at the moment, I'm writing busily around, because I'm a semiotician. My PhD was around semiotics because it so gets up my nose that we are so dependent on the English language. And it gets further up my nose that we assume that the cognitive functionality behind the English language is how the world makes sense. What a load of BS, let's just say. I'm Methodist, so I do not swear. But you all know what BS means, right? So I have another manuscript ready to go around reframing, meaning making from a good Angie perspective, from a Wakaya perspective, because I'm not arrogant enough to assume that I can speak for my countrymen across Australia, but I am assuming that our mobs make sense of our world in very similar ways around the relationality. So I'm writing furiously about that, so I'm not juggling that. I am totally committed to it, and I'm in the very fortunate place of it now being my professional job to write. So a real privilege. And yeah, just that freedom, because I'm fed up with walking into classrooms seeing Aboriginal kids learning how to fail. Because that's not us, that's not who we are, that's just new stuff that we've had to learn in the last few hundred years. So, yeah, it's the thing that is driving me to get up at 4:30 in the morning and write. But on something just a little bit different, can I just say that if you have not had the privilege of seeing this amazing artist perform, please take the opportunity. I saw a rehearsal a long time ago, and I still feel guilty that I did not pay just for the rehearsal alone. So do yourself a favour, as somebody on TV said.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deb. And that's beautiful acknowledgement. I was lucky enough to be in an audience at QPAC a few years ago of Umarella. That was an amazing event. Yeah, for sure. And Deb, I will call you out. You may not swear, but you don't mind spelling the swearing.
I've recorded that book, and I had to say that word.
Okay.
Yes. I did look around and check that my nana wasn't there, but I felt my ears being pulled.
That's great. Thank you so much. Helen, we had a little chat last night. I thought that anecdote from within your family was interesting.
I can't even remember what that was. It feels like it was such a long time ago. Oh, yeah. I always complain that one of my daughters is doing way too much, and she just looks at me and goes, really? You know? It's true. Look, I'm a bit like the others. I think it's actually just the way of being that allows you to do this. And we always talk about juggling, whatever, and, you know, do you drop some of the balls and what kind of doesn't get done? As far as I'm concerned, what doesn't get done just isn't important, because probably at some stage it'll get done, and usually by my husband, which is great, because I'm really bad at, you know, cleaning and all those sorts of things. So he just, just gets on and does it, which is fantastic. But just talking about my life in general, to get to the point of juggling multiple things, is I didn't go to school much as a kid. I stayed home with my nan. I was the youngest of a family of 5, and I loved being with Nan. She was just the most beautiful woman. And we would spend our days wandering around the garden, feeding the chooks, having cups of tea, chatting, watching World Championship Wrestling in the afternoons, which was her favourite show. And that roller skating show where they used to beat each other up, that roller derby, I think it was, that's the other one she loved. Does anyone remember that? Oh my God, she loved that. She'd be going, get him, go and get him, you know. This little beautiful old woman that I wandered around with was so fired up when she watched wrestling or roller derby. But, you know, she just taught me about life and love and language and all sorts of things. Unfortunately, I don't remember the language because I was just too young and I didn't understand how important it was, and it was taught in secret, so it was at a time when there was still too much fear around. But anyway, at some point I realised that I had to get on with school, and I remember a time came in high school when the headmaster called me up and said, Helen, you know, if you came to school more, you'd get better grades. And I said, but I've got all A's. And then he said, well, if you don't come to school, I'm going to suspend you. And I said, so if I don't come to school, you're going to make me stay home? And I was thinking, yes, you know. And he said, get out. I never want to see you again. And what I realised at that point was I really didn't fit, and I really didn't kind of quite get what I needed to do. But fortunately, I did well enough anyway, because I think I learned as much from Nan as I did from the teachers. And so much was rote learning anyway. You could just cram for the exams back in those days. There was no continuous assessment. If it had been continuous assessment, I would have failed miserably because I was never there. But then I got to uni, and uni was different because it was independent learning, and I got treated like an adult, and I felt more empowered to kind of get on and do things, and I was enjoying what I was doing, and I found medicine fascinating, and I really wanted to be a doctor. Apparently I'd said I wanted to be a brain surgeon when I was 10. Didn't know what that was, but obviously it sounded good at the time. But anyway, I see myself as a psychological brain surgeon now. Being a psychiatrist, just a fancy way of thinking about it. But as I went through university, and as I went through my specialist training, I mean, I have had so many years of frickin' education rammed down my throat. None of it taught me about me. None of it taught me about our fellas, our culture, anything about us. And certainly in psychiatry training, there was nothing about us. And it was very, very narrow. The learning was so science-based, cognitive-based. There was nothing about the other aspects of my life that I'd grown up with. Where were the stories? Where was the art? Where was the music? Where was the humour? Where was the joy? It was all missing. So I remember going to my director of training as a senior registrar saying, there's no curriculum on Indigenous people in the psychiatry course. And he said, well, go and write some then. So I did. And I thought to myself, well, how do I do this? And I thought, well, it's got to have a cultural lens. So I just went home and I said to the ancestors, how do I do this? So I'd never painted before. I went and bought canvases and paints, and I just painted it all. And I think that's because you can. It's in us. It's just the way we are. It was the way I was brought up. So I painted all the concepts, I wrote all the narratives, and I've been teaching the curriculum from some 20, 30 years now. And people love it because it's multidimensional and it's how people are as people. We don't learn in linear ways. We learn in conceptual and abstract and a multiplicity of ways. We learn through the imagery, through the story, through the science, and when you combine them all together, you learn really well. And so part of doing that work made me see that what I'd been doing for the sort of 10 years previously was that I'd closed off part of my life, like totally shut down that imaginative and creative element just to fit into a system that actually didn't work. So once I started doing that, then it became easier. And as I went on in life, I did have times when it was really too difficult to get into that creative space. But if we don't find those creative and imaginative spaces, we can't be well, because that when we're most stressed and we're most burnt out, that's when we need those creative spaces to help us with that innovative thinking about how to go forward. And we need those moments of stillness in time where we can just sit and be in the universe, and that's when we get clarity, and that's when we get understanding, and that's how we can build our resilience and go forward. So then it inspired me to start doing the writing and illustrating the children's stories. Now that's my passion project. That's not my job, that's my passion project. I work full time in mental health and research and a whole pile of other things. But when the ancestors give you a story and it's there and you wait for it to come, you just got to do it. And when you've got to do it, you've got to do it because you've been told you have to. And then the images come. And if you just follow that path, it just all happens naturally. A little bit like you said, the story wrote itself. I feel exactly the same way when I do a story or an image. I start writing and it just writes itself, and then I start drawing, or sometimes I wait for the image to come and then it just comes out and I go, oh, did I do that? Oh, look at that. But that's a wonderful creative space to be in when we turn our frontal lobes down a little bit and we just allow our mind to wander, and what it can create is just beautiful. And that's what our ancestors did. That was the way of being. That was so unique to our mobs in terms of providing us with that space to be. And that actually promotes our well-being. Just one more thing before I finish. I think that people say to me a lot, I'm not creative. It's in all of us. It's absolutely in all of us. It doesn't have to be in music or in painting or in storytelling. It can be in whatever thing that you're doing. It's the mind space that you create. It's that freedom to allow all your thoughts to wander and to connect with the universe. That's the creative space that you should be in.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Helen. That's fabulous. You referred to your husband, and you've referred to your wife, Deborah. You referred to Rick in the back, Deb. And a few days ago, my husband reminded me of this morning, actually, that Germaine Greer is quoted as saying to Louis Theroux, clever women should marry truck drivers. And no dissing truck drivers, because, as we know, Australia runs on trucks, and we wouldn't get what we get without their service. Maybe really quickly, going along here, what does that spark in you, that provocation that clever women should marry truck drivers? Starting with you, Deb.
Thank you. I think truck drivers are really hot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. My husband isn't a truck driver, but, he must be hot too, because we celebrated our 39th wedding anniversary last week. So.
Let's acknowledge that.
Yay. Yeah, it's just really, really interesting. I think it's just about the relationship. I know that the way that Rick and I decided to grow our family, I'd not have been able to do that without my non-truck driving husband. But because we've spent our 40 years together, going backwards and forwards, taking our kids home onto country, growing them there for, 4 or 5 years so that they can grow into who they actually needed to grow into, and then bringing them back into town so that they can work out how to get on a tram, which I've not been able to do yet. But yeah, I think the idea of, whether we're with truck drivers or not, I think the importance of a partner who is genuinely supportive is critically important in the whole thing. When I was doing my undergrad, I majored in classical critical literary theory because, you know, an arts degree at that time was, everyone was saying, well, it's not going to get you anywhere, but I needed to know what Aristotle thought about mimesis. So I wrote an assignment on mimesis, and I said to Rick, you know, can you just read this over? Because English is your language, it's not mine. And my darling husband said, oh, Bub, you know, you might need to get somebody else to read that. I don't know Aristotle or his missus. So, you know, but the support was there. The support was there. So,
Thanks so much, Deb. And, you know, I don't need to say this because you know this already, Deborah, but I would not want that to be considered a heteronormative gendered provocation either. So what would you say about what clever women should do in that domain?
Well, what I want to say is in life to find someone who shares your values, who understands what music is and the power of it. That journey of understanding is the most liberating experience I've ever had. My wife Nicolette is here today. She's a highly regarded...
Nicolette, wave her hand around.
Nicolette's waving. And one of Australia's most loved conductors. If you're a fan of the ballet, then you'd know Nicolette Fréon. And our way of seeing the world and understanding what music is and how powerful it is as a force to move people from sometimes their willful ignorance into understanding, and moving from understanding into knowing. That has been the most liberating experience for me. And when Nicolette asked me to marry her, I wanted to say straight away that, I said yes straight away, but I said, I also want to take your name. And I had friends who said, oh my goodness, but you have this name that people know, Deborah Cheetham, you know. And I said, yeah, but I want to acknowledge that there is a union here of someone who has liberated my own perception of myself as a musician, my own understanding of myself, who shares my values and my life. And I wanted to acknowledge that, so I did. And, you know, after a week, people got used to it. Except where we're staying at the moment, and they've sort of just run the two names all together, and they don't understand what my, you know, that it's two different names, but that's okay. But I wish that I had a Maya Angelou quote at my fingertips rather than responding to Jermaine's quit. Because what is that? I don't know what that is. What is that sentence? I don't know. I don't like to speak in generalisations, but I know what love is, and I know what my values are, and that was met in this relationship. And it's one of those times in your life when you realise that you're understood and that you can be yourself to the utmost of my potential. And that doesn't make everything else in the world easier. It's a mess out there, and but we navigate that together, and it's incredibly empowering. I think marry the person, or don't marry, but be with the person who shares your values and understands you, and can help you to understand yourself.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you. And any contribution from you, Helen?
Oh yes. So my divorce lawyer said, Helen, behind every strong woman is a weak man holding her back. And I think I was guilted into, not guilted into marriage, but guilted into the role that many women had perhaps in my era growing up, that you had to be a mother and a worker and a lover, and you had to do everything. And whatever you did was never quite good enough. And, you know, my sort of, you know, very poor cleaning skills often got talked about. And, you know, you kind of grow up feeling guilty that you're just not quite adequate, and you feel bad about it. But you're trying your best, and you are juggling a hell of a lot of things. And then life changes, and after, you know, many years of marriage, that ended in a rather awful way. But what I then found was just wonderful. And interestingly enough, the fellow that I'm now with was a high school crush. So I thought, God, why didn't I listen to my heart all those years ago, you know, because I obviously went the wrong way. And the biggest thing about my current partner is that he's kind. He's an incredibly kind man. And, you know, the love is there and the values are there and all of those other things are there. But kindness is one of those attributes we often forget about. And I think when you're busy and there's just so much on your plate and you're going off in all of these directions, if you're not actually kind, then, you know, you get angry and you get upset and you end up in conflict and in arguments. I have kind of virtually had an argument-free life for the last several years, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to resolve things peacefully, to always be kind to the other person, and that kindness now has seeped into everything else in my life, and I don't sort of have to worry that I'm going to be misunderstood or that I have to meet some expectation that's unrealistic. And look, he's an extremely clever man, but he's not jealous of my career. And I think that's the other thing for women, is your career often takes a back seat to another man. And, you know, I can't say about your experience, Deborah, because I'm in a different situation. But I think that's what often happens in a union, is that one person sort of takes the lead in a career and the other person has to take a back seat. And I think for many women, it's the man's career that takes the front runner. But for me now, I can get to do a hell of a lot of things because this lovely, kind, loving man is there behind me. I just want to tell you a story about when we were in high school. So I had a crush on him and he had a crush on me. You know, we would have been 17 at the time. And we were finishing high school and he was a little bit shy and I was a little bit shy. Hard to believe, I know, but I was very shy. And so I wanted to sign his back page of his yearbook, and I didn't want anyone else to sign it. I wanted it to be only me. So I filled up the whole back page with kisses. He didn't get it, you know. Honestly, I've chastised him about this many times already. Didn't you get it then? Anyway, and he signed my yearbook. So we go off on our life courses, and, you know, he went off and got married and had children. I went off and got married and had children. And then we came back together by a mutual friend who said, oh, you know, Helen, Richard, you know, is free and he'd like to catch up with you. And then he said to Richard, oh, Richard, Helen's free and she'd like to catch up with you. So little did we know we were this little matchmaking going on. Anyway, we got together and you know, obviously it was, again, this reconnection from a very old connection that was still there. There was still this attraction and this sense of, you know, I don't know what it is. It's like we just got under each other's skin or something in a good way. And then we were reminiscing about the yearbook. And so we went back and we had a look at the yearbook. And he goes, yeah, you filled up the back page with all these kisses. We counted them. There were 34. And we got together 34 years after high school. And he said to me, why didn't you just put one?
What a great story. Yes, any film people in the room? That's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Now, the last two questions I'll roll into one, and this double-headed single question now is, do you consider yourself to be in your prime, and what's next? So we'll start with Deb and then Deborah, yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm just sort of almost getting onto the road that will take me to my prime, I figure. You know, I live this amazing life. I have 3 children who are genuinely beautiful, beautiful people. The best hearts, you know. They appreciate home and family. They adore where they come from. They are very, very proud and strong. They make me cry because they're my inspiration, absolutely, you know, because they're so bloody smart. There, I said it, bloody smart. So, yeah, I'm not even halfway close to my prime because I'm telling you, I'm on this hobby horse for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Aboriginal Australians have had a written language. We have been told in the last 250 years we have not. We have had a written language. My mob and my kids read all of what we now call art in the same way that I've taught my kids to read English. I do not want my granddaughters to attend a school that will continue to invisibilise the amazing cultures, the amazing knowledges that live in this country, because we are not the home of the longest lived cultures in the world. We're the home of the longest lived civilisations. So I'm not anywhere near my prime yet.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Deb. Deborah?
In 2009, and I'm looking at Suri over here because you've been on this journey with me a long time, I established Short Black Opera because I wanted to share the art form that I love most with our people, because I reckon that we actually invented opera. You know, we've been singing, dancing our story for millennia. And so Short Black Opera was born, and that was achieved by bringing together the most amazing company of people who saw the vision as well and said, yeah, I'm going to commit to that. And so I could have said, oh, wow, I'm really hitting my prime now. But I don't actually know what that is. I don't think that's a time, or I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I know there's plenty still to be done. And the second part of that question was what next, and I've been thinking about this really deeply, and I was having a conversation with Jane Harrison backstage and saying, you know, I want to take time next year to write the next chapter of what this story is, you know, this journey is. I want to take time. And as I've been mulling it through with my wife, Nicolette, and saying, really it's coming back to what I said about my bio, I guess, at the beginning of this conversation. I want to distill down to where I want to make my contribution next, and it's not just about my happiness, but where do I feel that I've been the most effective, the most productive. And it's when I'm just working with our people and finding ways of empowering them. And you know, I've had lots of huge partnerships in this country with non-Indigenous organisations. We've worked for universities, we've worked with big arts companies. All of that, it's not to say that wasn't important, but what I need to do now, and maybe it's part of being in a prime or whatever it is for me, I want to distill back to being in that little group, that classroom, that space where children are saying to me, I want to sing, okay, let's sing. I want to write a song, let's write that song. I want to know my language and I want to sing it, let's do that. And so I think where I'm up to and the what next, and whether that's prime land or whatever it is distilling back to what do I need to do for our people? How can I contribute to their lives directly? And something happened. I want you to think on this, and I want you to help me with this, because something happened after October 14 last year. Something has happened, and my time is being hijacked in a way, if I let it happen, like it never has been before. There are more demands on me to clean up the mess of colonisation than there've ever been before. Is anybody else feeling that? It's like I'm just inundated, and I don't know whether, I think it ranges from everything from, hey, we did this for you. We marched and we stood up and we put posters up. It didn't work out, but we did something for you. Now you do something for us. Make it better, Deborah. And I don't know that I can make it better by going to you anymore. I think I need to go just back to our people and say, what would you like to do? What do you want to do? And in any way I can help you, I will. But I tell you, as a teacher, that's where I started my career, as a high school teacher, high school music teacher. Every time I've walked into a classroom, a rehearsal space or a workshop, I've learned as much as I've imparted. And so I look forward to that experience of just distilling it down to, not to disrespect all of the other experiences and the partnerships or whatever, but right now and after last year, I know I just need to go back to that grassroots connection with people and put all my energy there. That's what's next for me.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Deborah. Helen.
I feel much the same, Deborah, honestly. After the referendum, it was such a devastating blow in such a large scale as well. In terms of Prime, I guess I'll see it in two different ways. In terms of career, I think I've reached pinnacle. So my most amazing job that I ever did, very, very profound, disturbing, but inspiring, was when I was a commissioner on the Royal Commission for child abuse. So 5 years of going around the country, listening to people's stories, going to all the prisons, going to lots of communities, doing all the public hearings, writing a massive report and seeing how the recommendations are filtered down, but also just seeing the impact on people's lives was just the most amazing experience. And I still pay great respect and give great credit to the courage that all of the survivors showed in coming forward and sharing those stories with us. It was an absolute privilege. And it's still an honour to meet them today if they come up to say hello. So I think in terms of pinnacle, that was the pinnacle of my career. In terms of Prime, I just think we get more feisty as we get older, don't we? And I think we gather our life's experiences, and I don't like to think that, you get wisdom as you get older, because I don't think it's automatic. But I'd like to think that I'm moving towards the wisdom of some of our elders and being able to incorporate that into the way that I am and the way I'm doing things. And so I don't really know when I'll reach Prime. I mean, again, I'll go back to my mum at 96. She was sitting out the back one day, she was looking a bit miserable. And I said, oh, what's up? And she goes, oh, I just don't know where my life's going. I said, you're 96, what do you think?
So good.
And she said to me, can you find me a group of, old Aboriginal women I can at least talk to then? Because, all her friends have died and, we're in different... So, I've started writing books with her now just to keep it going. But she's just given me a whole pile more work to do. But I figure if she can still be kicking it out at 96, then I haven't reached my prime. And I guess that's what you see, isn't it? You see that strength in some of our oldies as they get to that point. And she's not thinking about the end of life. And she lives with me and I've got to look after her, so I'm thinking about it. But she still thinks, she had a dream that she was going to be 103, and I said, oh, Mum, that wasn't a dream, that was a nightmare. But she's so cluey and she's so clever and she's still dreaming stories, and we talk about them, and I'm now dreaming more stories myself, and I'm really coming into that prime maybe of the storytelling. Like it took me a long time to get away from Western thinking, and I did all that creativity stuff, 20, 30 years ago. But it's now, I'm just getting more and more stories. And my concern in terms of what's next is I've got to find more publishers because I want to get them all done before I die. And I've got 2 publishers now and they've got tons of my stories to go, but I'm just getting them from everywhere now. And I think it's my ancestors saying, listen girl, you've got to get all these down now. because these are our stories for our children. And the last story that I've published at the moment is actually a story that I wrote about my nan, and it's about a little girl, because her totem's the crow. And it's a story about a little girl who's born with two spirits, a crow spirit and a human spirit, and how she grows up through life and how she transforms ultimately into a crow, and about her sacrifice. And my nan's sacrifice was that she just loved us kids to pieces her whole life, even though she'd suffered incredible adversity. And she just showed that resilience. So every time I think that I'm ready to complain and be negative, I just have to think about her sacrifice and her way of being and her joyfulness in the world despite everything that happened. And it just keeps me going. So I don't know what's next, but I do think the post-referendum landscape has taken us backwards. And I, like the other ladies, feel like we've got to put more effort together. And I think I'm going to seek out more time with Mob and have that solidarity, because I think that the strength of us together is what's going to make the difference in the future.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Helen. Fabulous. So pitch black was yesterday between authors and publishers, but let's hope there's some more publishers in the room today as well. And so now it's time for the roving mic. Who has the microphone? Okay, your name?
Joel.
Sorry?
Joel.
Joel, thank you. Wave your hand around if you'd like to ask a question. We have about 14 minutes left, so that's a good amount of time to chat. And I know it's Saturday morning. We have one from Julie.
Yeah, look, a question for Deborah. What are you working on next? You know, it's exciting to be in the presence of somebody who's got such an extraordinary career, but I'd love to know what's next, and also from the other writers on the...
Thank you so much for the question. I've just completed 4 commissions, actually. 2 for the MSO, which will premiere this week. 1 for the Hawaii Symphony, and for those of you who know my first book of collected songs, Dangala Choral Connection Songbook, there's a volume 2 coming out, so I've been working on that. But an exciting project that is unfolding now in Sydney on Gadigal country is a Sydney language opera. And what I wanted to do was to equip those emerging composers, or some emerging composers, with the skills to write their first opera. And so I'm mentoring in that space. There are 5 composers, and I'm also contributing some music to that. So it actually tells 5 different stories from Darug and Darawal communities, and so that's a project that I'm working on at the moment. I also want to take that time that I mentioned just before to ensure that the next generation of musicians who come through Short Black Opera are supported, and also that they're not just feeding into somebody else's funding app. That's happening a lot out there in performing arts companies. It's happened, you know, all along. But just that opportunities are put in our way, but it's really somebody else's outcome, and we're just part of that. So I'm trying to empower people to have their own voice, not only as singers, but now as instrumentalists through Ensemble du Tala, which is our chamber ensemble, and also as composers and conductors, as it happens. We'll be heading up to Gama this year, for instance, to perform up there, and in the Darwin Festival also. And one really lovely thing that just happened, and I'll finish with this, I've just come back from being in Norway, where Nicolette was conducting the Norwegian National Ballet. And while I was there, I was connecting with Sami culture and composers. And I was fortunate to meet Anne-Marie Pedersen-Margot, who's written a requiem, so similar to my requiem, not the same scale, but same purpose. And her requiem is called Reconciliation, Requiem Before Reconciliation. I thought that was so powerful. And also the Eurovision pop sensation Kano, who have a Sami member. We have a project together in composition. So some wonderful things going forward, but it's really, for me, it's distilling down into opportunities that are really meaningful for our people, and collaborations that empower us first to do the things that we want to do. So that's what I'm up to.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Sorry,
yes, I know. I estimated to 12:30 and we were actually going to 12:15. Thanks for picking me up, Jane.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we will have to wrap up now. Thank you so much for joining in, communion and community today with this amazing panel. Please thank them.
And thanks to Sandra.